$1 million neighborhood was constructed on land that had been in his family for over a century. However, when Elijah presented a handwritten clause dated 1923, the entire development and every home within it legally reverted to his ownership. Elijah Jackson didn't require an alarm clock. For 30 years, he had woken naturally just before sunrise, made his coffee, and walked out to the back porch of his father's old farmhouse near Opelika, Alabama. From that quiet wooden deck, he had a clear view across the southern field, the very field where his great-grandfather Otis grew sweet potatoes in the 1930s, and where Elijah's own children had once played in the tall grass. But that morning, something was amiss. The ground felt altered. It trembled. Elijah peered into the distance. Beyond the trees, past the fence line, plumes of red dirt rose into the sky. The machinery was present, heavy, loud, and incongruous. He placed his coffee down and headed towards the sound. Reaching the ridge, he halted, stunned. 3 bulldozers were visible. Behind them, construction teams in hard hats and neon vests were marking the ground with flags, as if claiming it was unclaimed land. But it wasn't. He quickened his pace, the Georgia clay swirling up around his boots. "Hey," he called. A woman in a light gray blazer turned toward him, sunglasses and a clipboard in hand. She seemed out of place in a field. She appeared someone who had never worn work boots. "Can I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice suggesting she already anticipated the response. Elijah surveyed the scene. "What is the purpose of your presence on my land?" Her eyebrow showed little movement. This parcel was approved for residential development under West Haven HOA's expansion permit. "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Elijah's voice rose slightly. "My name is Elijah Jackson. That piece of land has been in my family since 1923. It is not for sale. It never has been." The woman held her clipboard up like a shield. "County records indicate this section was listed as unclaimed due to boundary discrepancies during the last zoning update. You are welcome to speak with our legal team, but construction is already underway." Elijah's heart was thumping hard now, but not from fear. "Ma'am, that land is not unclaimed. I have walked it every morning since I was 27 years old. My father was born right over that rise. You're building on ground that holds more history than you could encompass with your permits." She offered a polite, empty smile. "Then I suggest you take it up with zoning and planning. We're moving forward." The machines revved louder behind her. Foundations were being dug. Trees that once shaded Elijah's childhood baseball games were now being stripped away root by root. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned and walked back towards his house. His pace was slower now. Inside, he went directly to the cabinet above the fireplace. It held old papers, maps, and deeds, dusty and yellowed with age. He recalled his father once saying Otis didn't trust anybody with this land, not even the government. At the time, Elijah had considered it mere paranoia. But as the ground outside was being torn apart, that paranoia felt more like protection. He carefully unfolded the brittle deed and saw it. The faded ink revealed Otis Jackson's name. 88 acres were purchased for $480 in 1923. There were no loans, no banks involved. It was built on sweat, grit, and the unwavering pride of a man determined to leave nothing for anyone else to claim. Elijah settled down. Documents lay before him. A growing unease began in his stomach. Something felt amiss. This wasn't simply a clerical error. He reached for the phone and contacted the Lee County Zoning Office. "I'm calling regarding a construction crew impacting a portion of my property. My name is Elijah Jackson. My family has owned this land for over 100 years. The person I spoke with initially responded with a detached, scripted tone. They stated that if my land was affected by the zoning realignment, I should have received a mail notification. I did not receive any notification. They suggested that notices can occasionally be lost, and then ended the conversation. It was dismissed with that, lost. Potentially, decades of family ownership could be jeopardized by a misplaced envelope. However, Elijah wasn't solely feeling anger. He recalled a story his father had shared with him. Years had passed since Elijah had last touched the old trunk located at the back of the hallway closet. He pulled it out slowly, coughing as dust filled the narrow corridor. His knees cracked as he knelt, unlatching the brass lock. The lid opened with a tired creak. Inside, among black and white photos, funeral programs, and Otis's tarnished railroad watch, was a bundle of paper wrapped in oilcloth, precisely where his father indicated it would be. Elijah was seated on the floor, cross-legged, carefully unrolling the cloth and retrieving a weighty, leather-bound envelope. This was the original deed, the one Otis had kept for himself. Initially, it appeared like any other legal document: printed text, handwritten notes in the margins, a wax seal partially worn. However, concealed roughly midway through the second page, in Otis's faint, cursive writing, was something unexpected. In his own handwriting, squeezed into the margins, a note read, "If any buildings are built on this land without the agreement of the deed holder or their closest relative, those buildings will automatically belong to the deed holder and no payment will be given." This was witnessed and signed on February 2nd, 1923. Elijah blinked. He read it again and again. His hands trembled. He wasn't legally trained, unlike lawyers, but he knew the story behind that clause. It concerned how Otis had distrusted men in suits, particularly landmen. Following a near deception in 1931, where he almost sold half the property for a minimal price, Otis had personally compensated a notary to assist him in drafting what he termed a safeguard impenetrable to any attempt to bypass it. This safeguard wasn't constructed from physical materials like wood or wire. It was comprised of carefully chosen words. Elijah reached for the telephone once more. He contacted Mr. Boone, the local attorney his family had relied on for 3 generations. "I need to show you something," Elijah stated. "It's about the land, about Otis." After 3 hours, Elijah was seated in the worn leather armchair, facing Boone's desk. The lawyer peered through bifocals, carefully examining the document. "Well, he remarked, tapping a knuckle against the clause. "You don't see this kind of thing anymore, but it's clever. If this was notarized and filed with the original deed, it's enforceable." "It is notarized," Elijah said. Otis made absolutely certain of that. Boone nodded. "It's old, yes, but if it's on the record, it's still the law. It might be buried in archives somewhere, but that doesn't make it disappear. So what do I do?" "First," Boone said, pulling a legal pad toward him, "you don't say a word to those developers. Let them build. Every house they finish becomes yours. It wasn't due to your identity, but because of Otis. That man didn't simply leave you land. He left you a carefully constructed snare. A remarkably clever one." Elijah relaxed, feeling the significance of it acutely. He's been prepared to initiate a conflict, enter courtrooms, and navigate bureaucratic hurdles to demonstrate what rightfully belonged to him. But Otis had already handled the struggle. Now, Elijah only needed to wait. Nevertheless, he wasn't foolish. He contacted 2 additional lawyers, just to be certain. One for Montgomery, one for Birmingham. He provided them with scanned copies of the deed, the clause, and the notarization. Both contacted him again within a week. "This is the most secure private property clause I've ever encountered," one stated, "Mr. Jackson. It's as if your great-grandfather constructed a legal landmine." The other remarked, "I've never seen anything like it. As long as you record the construction, everything they build becomes yours. Every nail, every foundation." Consequently, Elijah purchased a drone and employed a professional surveyor. Motion sensor cameras were installed along the southern field's edge. He meticulously documented everything. This included timestamps, recorded footage, ground measurements, copies of sale signs, and open house flyers. Each day, he observed the actions of the West Haven HOA, actions that he believed they should never have taken. They constructed as if they held absolute ownership and marketed as if they had the right to sell. But Elijah understood the truth. And Otis? Otis had anticipated this day for 100 years. If the clause proved to be true, Elijah understood he had a single course of action remaining: to wait. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, Elijah would position himself on the grassy ridge, the the sight of the former barbed wire fence. He would rest against the wooden post that he and his father had set into the ground many years prior, with his arms crossed and a camera around his neck, observing. The land below was undergoing change. Where sweet potatoes once grew and his cousin had broken his leg attempting to ride a makeshift dirt bike, now stood rows of modern homes. The exteriors featured vinyl siding in muted colors, fenced-in backyards, and driveways so smooth they didn't feel like they belonged in the country. It felt like watching someone else rearrange your childhood memories without permission. Roads were paved with names like Sycamore Lane and Sunset Walk. Pretty names, but lacking any history. Light poles were installed, sidewalks were poured, and even a cul-de-sac was added that cut right through the grove where Elijah's mother had planted muscadines. The HOA proceeded quickly. Too quickly. Within a month, foundations were set for 20 homes. Real estate agents began appearing on weekends, conducting open houses and offering guided tours to couples and retirees. Large signs near the front entrance announced, "Now selling," starting at $385,000. Elijah remained silent. He simply observed. He recorded everything. Daily drone footage was recorded. Close-up photos of property markers were taken. Videos documented workers pouring concrete, installing electrical lines, and setting frames. He organized all of this in a folder on his laptop labeled Otis's Revenge. Occasionally, a project manager or a site supervisor noticed him. Sometimes they waved. Once a man with a clipboard called out, "Morning," with forced cheerfulness. Elijah did not reply. His purpose was not to socialize. He was there to observe. Then Jessica arrived. Jessica Brenner. She remained consistently the woman she had always been, clipboard and blazer. Initially, she didn't recognize Elijah upon his reappearance at the Ridge. However, within 3 weeks, she began to acknowledge him. On one occasion, she smiled and called out, "Still watching us, Mr. Jackson?" Elijah responded by raising his camera and photographing her. She did not smile again afterward. New houses appeared rapidly, like weeds spreading. The swift pace was unsettling. One day, there would be bare ground. 3 days elapsed, and the construction reached the stage of a complete frame and roof. By the close of the second month, 32 homes had been framed. Of those, 16 were completed, featuring laid sod and polished front porches ready for weekend viewings. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He proceeded to the county clerk's office to retrieve the most recent sales records. He observed West Haven's name appearing alongside buyers, with the buyers primarily from out of state, Ohio, Florida, and even some originating from California. He meticulously recorded observations, noting each closing date. He verified the location of each home, confirming its presence within the 88-acre zone. All residences were situated inside Otis's boundary. All of them. He even overheard Jessica one morning, speaking on the phone while walking the site. She said, "Yeah, Phase 1's flying off the market. We're starting Phase 2 next month. No issues on our end. The local guy watching from the Ridge, just some nosy landowner trying to stir up drama. We're clear." Elijah clenched his teeth, but remained silent. She had no idea. He possessed 3 legal opinions supporting his position. He had documented evidence, with timestamps, of construction on the contested land. He had Otis's clause, and crucially, he had time. Allowing them to build wasn't merely a tactic, it was a matter of justice. Each home they finished, every square foot they sold, contributed to a debt they were unaware of accumulating. Elijah had already calculated the figures. If the construction followed the initial plan for all 156 homes, along with the community clubhouse and parkland, the total value of the real estate would approach $70 million. This would be transferred to him. Jessica believed she was developing a neighborhood, but Elijah understood the reality. She was, in effect, expanding his portfolio. However, as the sold signs accumulated, Elijah started questioning how long he could delay the arrival of actual families. The first time Elijah observed children cycling on the newly constructed sidewalks, he experienced a disconcerting sensation in his chest. A profound sadness, not anger nor regret. The children were oblivious. Naturally, they played, circling, chasing, laughing as children do. Their parents watched, enjoying coffee on porches overlooking the Jackson property. This was land Elijah's great-grandfather had cleared manually. A few houses down, a young couple was unpacking boxes. The man waved. Elijah raised his hand a little without knowing why. He was unfamiliar with them. They were unfamiliar with him. The new driveway occupied what had previously been his grandmother's garden. He walked home at a slower pace that day, not due to any need discomfort, but because the anger that had propelled him was beginning to transform into a different feeling. That evening, he was alone in his den, the deed spread out before him, as usual. The clause remained present, tangible, and still his. However, now he saw faces connected to the houses. He recognized people, not suits, not developers. Families were attempting to establish themselves on property they were unaware was not available for purchase. He reached for the telephone and contacted Boone. "I need to discuss something with you," Elijah stated. Boone responded, "I'm listening." Elijah continued, "If I delay until all the houses are completed, the price will increase significantly. However, if I intervene now, I might prevent these people from facing a difficult situation. They've just moved in, Boone. I observed a young girl riding a bicycle with training wheels today." A considerable silence followed. Boone's voice softened. "That presents a difficult ethical decision, Elijah. You are requesting something that is not permissible. It's a personal matter. Legally, you are justified, as Otis confirmed. However, what kind of justice do you seek? I am unwilling to cause harm to these individuals," Elijah stated. "Yet, I do want West Haven to be held accountable. They didn't merely trespass. They obliterated my family's history as if it held no significance. Then perhaps the true inquiry is it possible to inflict pain upon them without harming the people who purchased those homes in good faith?" Elijah rubbed his eyes. "Is it possible?" Boone paused once more. "Gaining their commitment requires careful consideration and meticulous attention to detail. Allow them to actively participate in the process, enabling them to take ownership. Ensure your guidance is clear and impactful, so it resonates even before others become involved." Elijah reclined in his chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above him. "I observed someone planting a tree today," he remarked quietly. He appeared pleased, as if envisioning this as their permanent residence. "Perhaps it still could be," Boone responded. "The outcome relies on your actions." That night, Elijah experienced little sleep. He revisited the perimeter of the property, holding a flashlight, observing lights shimmering from windows overlooking the southern field. Within those houses, families were establishing themselves, displaying pictures, preparing meals, and putting children to sleep. He couldn't have been responsible for their losses, yet he couldn't overlook the arrogance of West Haven, Jessica Brenner's dismissive gesture, the unanswered calls from their lawyers, and their disregard for generations, as if constructing on unclaimed territory. Elijah remained motionless for an extended period at the tree line. The wind rustled through the tall grass. He recalled Otis, remembering the nights that man had kept watch on the porch, a shotgun resting across his lap, prepared for any trouble. Otis favored immediate action. However, Elijah valued strategy and carefully considered his options. He resolved to wait until the final brick was in place, not to inflict harm upon the families, but to ensure those who had shown disrespect towards his family faced the complete consequence. And then, he would ensure no one ever forgot the name Otis Jackson, but Elijah understood that patience wouldn't simplify the next phase. It would only make it more significant. The notification arrived by mail, enclosed within a polished invitation featuring gold detailing. "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of West Haven Estates, Phase 2 celebration and ribbon-cutting ceremony. Join us for food, live music, and a look at the future of luxury living in Easter Alabama." Elijah examined the card for a minute before setting it on the kitchen counter beside the deed. The event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. At that time, 138 homes were completely built. An additional 18 were undergoing final inspections. The community center had recently opened, featuring a pool, tennis courts, and a marble floor lobby resembling a country club. It was being hailed as the crown jewel of the county, and every inch of it was situated on Jackson land. The night before, Elijah carefully ironed his only suit, the one he wore to church, weddings, and funerals, paying special attention to the cuffs, a detail Otis would have emphasized. He packed a leather folder containing the original deed, the notarized clause, the surveyor's report, photo evidence, and legal opinions. He placed it on the passenger seat with the care one would give a newborn child. As he arrived at the newly paved entrance of West Haven Estates, the morning sun broke through. Banners fluttered in the breeze. A white tent stood on the clubhouse lawn where guests enjoyed champagne and sampled small sandwiches off silver trays. He parked near the back of the lot, concealed from view. No one recognized him. Not yet. From the periphery of the gathering, Elijah observed as Jessica Brenner, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and large sunglasses, approached the podium. Microphones were adjusted. Camera flashes went off. "Welcome," she exclaimed. "Today signifies both the completion of our second phase and the beginning of a promising new era for our community." Applause resonated. The mayor stood beside her. Several county officials, whom Elijah had contacted months prior without receiving a response, were also present. Jessica continued, her voice gaining intensity with each phrase. "Thanks to our exceptional team and the backing of our local government, West Haven is now a home to 156 families and expanding." The string quartet played gently in the background. Elijah moved forward deliberately, the sound of his shoes on the gravel noticeable. Jessica looked towards him, but showed no reaction. Not yet. He raised his voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Before you cut that ribbon," he said calmly, and the crowd fell silent, heads turning. Jessica blinked. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice strained. "This is a private event." "I understand precisely what this concerns," Elijah stated. "That is why I am present." The mayor appeared doubtful. "Could you please elaborate on the problem?" Elijah raised a leather folder. "I am Elijah Jackson. My family has held title to this land for more than 100 years, and every house, road, tennis court, and mailbox West Haven constructed sits on property that was never legally theirs." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Jessica moved away from the podium. "We pursued all legal avenues. A zoning error occurred some time back that you failed to fix," Elijah added, opening the file. "And significantly, this deed from 1923 includes a provision drafted by my great-grandfather. It specifies that any building constructed without permission transfers ownership to the deed's owner." He presented the document. A reporter, standing close, moved to photograph the page. Jessica's expression remained unchanged. "You're attempting to deceive us," she whispered. "That clause is invalid after this length of time." Elijah remained unmoved. "I've had this examined by 3 lawyers. They all concurred. It carries legal weight. This land belongs to me, and everything constructed upon it as well." A man in a gray suit spoke quietly to Jessica. She visibly paled. The mayor cleared his throat. "We might need to suspend the ceremony." Jessica faced Elijah again, her voice now firm. "You observed. You monitored our construction, and you remained silent. I informed you on your initial visit that it was my land," he stated calmly. "I saw you smile, and you called security, instructed me to speak with your legal team. So I did." A gasp came from behind you. It could have been a homeowner or someone else. Reporters were now gathering, with flash bulbs popping and pens writing furiously. Jessica appeared as if she'd swallowed glass. "You'll never get away with this," she whispered. "I don't have to get away with anything," Elijah replied. "You passed the folder to me." He closed it carefully and stepped back. The ceremony was halted. No ribbon was cut. Elijah recognized this as merely the initial stage. The significant repercussions hadn't yet materialized. The following morning, Elijah's phone began ringing before sunrise. An unknown number appeared. He allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Subsequently, it rang again and again. By the afternoon, he had accumulated 12 missed calls for voicemails and 2 emails flagged as urgent from West Haven's legal team. By evening, The local news had broadcast a segment entitled "Man Claims Ownership of Entire HOA Community." Is it legal? The anchor appeared bewildered. Elijah was not. He was at his kitchen table with Boone, examining the deed for what seemed like the 100th time. The wording hadn't changed. The ink remained faded but legible. Boone reclined. They are panicking. They constructed a $1 million project on land they didn't own. You possess every advantage. That night, West Haven's president telephoned directly. Elijah didn't recognize the voice. He had never communicated with the man previously, but he detected the strain. "Mr. Jackson, I believe it is time we consider a resolution. We are keen to resolve this matter swiftly and discreetly. The current media coverage is not beneficial to anyone involved. We are ready to provide you with appropriate compensation for the land's assessed value, alongside a goodwill premium." Elijah didn't react with laughter, though it was evident he was restraining himself. "You're suggesting a payment equivalent to the land's previous worth, prior to the construction of the luxury neighborhood? That's a significant offer. It feels like an offensive proposition." Elijah stated, "You didn't simply relocate Earth. You sold property you didn't own. And now you wish to purchase it at a reduced price after you sold it for millions?" Silence followed, and Elijah could hear the breathing on the other end. Controlled. Stiff. "We could challenge this, Mr. Jackson." "You could." Elijah concurred. "But every home you constructed is already sold. Every buyer now has to question who owns their house. You wish to fight? That will be complicated, costly, and public." Another lengthy pause. "We'll be in touch." The line disconnected. 2 days later, the formal offer arrived via courier. The offer included $4.2 million for the land, a non-disclosure agreement, and a confirmation that Elijah would relinquish all claims to the structures built. Boone reacted with disbelief, nearly choking on his coffee. "I've seen offers disguised as bribes before, but this is exceptional," he remarked, pushing the proposal away. Elijah remained silent, his attention fixed on his neighbor's children using a trampoline recently installed where his grandfather used to park his tractor. He was unwilling to have those children displaced. He was unwilling to have those families hurt. However, he also would not allow West Haven to escape with minimal consequences. Therefore, Elijah prepared a response. He refused the offer, requesting the complete assessed value for each sold home and unsold lot, reduced by a 10% discount for a comprehensive settlement. He pledged not to initiate eviction or repossession, but stipulated that West Haven must cover the legal expenses for each homeowner requiring a revised deed. He insisted on ownership of the community center, parks, and all remaining properties, requesting $61 million. There were no restrictions on speaking publicly, and a public apology was required. Jessica did not contact anyone. Her name was absent from any new official communications, though Elijah received reports. She was reportedly on leave. Some believed she had been dismissed, while others said she resigned. Regardless, the dispute had escalated to the boardroom. During the following 4 weeks, legal representatives from both parties met almost daily. Boone and Simone were seated opposite West Haven's corporate counsel, meticulously negotiating while Elijah largely observed the proceedings. They explored various approaches, proposing a reduced sum, hinting at arbitration, and even implying Elijah had knowingly permitted construction to proceed. Elijah remained composed, stating, "You built on my land. I didn't request it. I cautioned you against it. You disregarded me." Ultimately, West Haven conceded. The concluding agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the unsuccessful ribbon cutting. Elijah's total compensation amounted to $54 million, along with ownership of the community clubhouse, the undeveloped lots, and complete legal authority to oversee the correction of homeowner deeds, ensuring no families were displaced. The settlement was formally revealed at a public press conference. Elijah made brief remarks, expressing gratitude to his great-grandfather for his vision and noting that the past occasionally safeguards the future. He departed quietly, avoiding any media attention or interviews. A desire for tranquility remained. However, Elijah wasn't complete. He needed to ensure Otis's legacy represented something greater than retribution. The funds didn't alter Elijah, not in the anticipated manner. He continued to reside in the familiar house, the aged farmhouse where he'd spent his childhood, where his mother's cooking had permeated the walls with the aroma of fried okra, and where Otis's hammer marks were still evident in the doorframe. He didn't purchase a new truck, didn't relocate to a larger city, didn't install fencing around the land. He did, however, create something tangible. Several months following the agreement, Elijah utilized a segment of the funds, approximately $18 million, to purchase an additional 40-acre parcel of land situated 10 miles east outside the town of Tuskegee. This was land that had remained unclaimed for decades. He designated it the Otis Project. Working alongside local contractors, teachers, and community leaders, Elijah initiated the construction of what he envisioned as a unique neighborhood, designed not for financial gain, but for individuals who had previously been excluded from residing in areas like West Haven. The homes were offered at cost, with mortgage support integrated into the program, and applications were evaluated with empathy rather than relying solely on credit scores. Within the first year, 24 homes were finished, and each was occupied by a family. Individuals from all walks of life, teachers, single parents, factory workers, veterans, were welcomed, regardless of their circumstances. One morning, while standing on the first street of the Otis Project, Elijah observed a group of children playing tag on a front lawn. One little boy sparked a memory of his brother Curtis when they were 7 and too stubborn to wear shoes during summer. Boone arrived later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and a wide grin. "You know what they're calling you in town now," he said. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The accidental mayor," Boone chuckled. "People say you were given millions, and instead of vanishing, you began constructing front porches." Elijah smiled. Otis didn't nurture hoarders. He cultivated workers. This wasn't merely words. Elijah utilized a portion of the remaining funds to establish a community center in Opelika, offering complimentary tutoring programs, job placement assistance, and a garden where seniors instructed children on cultivating tomatoes that weren't purchased from a grocery store. He also transformed the former West Haven Community Clubhouse, which he now legally owned, into a shared resource center, renaming it Jackson Hall. The tennis courts were made available for complimentary lessons to local young people. The pool offered dedicated swim times for seniors 3 mornings each week. While the Homeowners Association initially disapproved, the homeowners themselves greatly appreciated the changes. Initially, a small number of residents distanced themselves from Elijah, fearing he would seize their homes and viewing him as an adversary. Eventually, they understood that he didn't intend to dismantle what they had established. He simply desired recognition for the work his family had previously undertaken. Now, many approached him directly, seeking information about repairs, suggestions for local services, or guidance on cultivating vegetables in Alabama's challenging red clay. He consistently offered assistance to everyone. "I ain't trying to be a hero," he told a vet, a single mom, and one of the new homeowners. "I simply believe land should never be taken without acknowledging those who labored upon it previously." Yvette nodded. "Well, my son considers you a kind of superhero," Elijah chuckled. "Have you ever seen me attempt to change a flat tire?" He's likely to reconsider quickly. With the commencement of the second year of the Otis Project, Elijah made a final visit to the county archives. This building, where he initially retrieved the original deed, now displayed a framed photograph of Otis Jackson. Below the photo was a plaque that read, "In honor of the man who protected his land so his descendants could protect their community." Elijah stood silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He removed a small object wrapped in cloth, Otis's old railroad watch. He carefully set it on the glass counter close to the display. "I always detest being late," Elijah murmured. The sky outside had shifted to that gentle golden hue just prior to sunset, the very shade Otis would often appreciate following a lengthy day in the fields. Elijah smiled, not the smile of a victor, but the smile of one who had fulfilled an obligation. For ultimately, the clause wasn't simply about preventing thieves, it was about ensuring no one overlooked those who preceded them. And now, the land was speaking once more, its voice stronger than the sound of the bulldozers. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More stories such as this, authentic, unfiltered, and grounded in truth, are forthcoming. He entered the bank, his appearance marked by a tattered coat and old shoes. People assumed he was simply another person experiencing homelessness. Then, he spoke calmly, stating, "I own the land this building sits on," and presented documentation to support his claim. The door's chimes sounded as it always did upon entry, yet few people acknowledged it. They barely glanced up. A few fleeting looks were all it received. One woman subtly shifted her position to observe him before returning to her computer screen. Another took a sip of her coffee and rolled her eyes, murmuring something to the teller beside her. A man entering the space appeared out of sync with the surroundings, not threatening, simply different. The environment consisted of shiny glass, polished tile, and Bluetooth headsets visible behind the counters. This was Morris Coltrane Langston, age 62, with a thick gray beard. His coat was 2 sizes too large, and his jeans suggested a past no one wished to explore. He moved deliberately, not due to age, but with caution. Each step felt significant, as if he were assessing his place within the setting. He approached the counter where Brittany was working. She offered him a brief look. "Sir, a bank card or ID is required for withdrawals," she stated plainly. Morris offered a gentle smile, though it seemed weary. "I don't require a withdrawal. I need to discuss property," he said. Brittany's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at her colleague, who was visibly trying to contain laughter. "Property?" she asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "I believe I own the land this bank is built on." At that moment, the laughter erupted. The message originated from Cliff Yarrow, the assistant branch manager, who had approached, arms crossed. Cliff was a man who displayed his authority prominently. He made no attempt to conceal his amusement. "Sir, I believe you are at the incorrect building," Cliff stated. "This is not the county records office. You cannot simply enter and declare ownership of a bank." "I did not say I own the bank," Maurice responded, his voice quiet. "I said I own the land. There's a distinction." Now, all eyes were upon him. The security guard, identified as Lee, who typically appeared to be checking his phone near the door, stood up straighter and moved forward. Cliff questioned, "Do you have any paperwork to back that up?" Maurice slowly reached into his coat pocket. For a moment, Lee reacted, conditioned by experience to anticipate a potential threat when a black man reached into a pocket. However, Morris's movements were unhurried and non-threatening. He carried the envelope deliberately, as if accustomed to it. He produced a thick, crumpled packet. The pages were yellowed with worn edges, having been folded and unfolded numerous times. At the top, it read, "Franklin Delroy, 1913 land deed." Below that were stamped legal seals and notary signatures. "I've held on to this since my father passed," I said. "And he kept it since his father passed," Maurice added. The deed belonged to a black-owned cooperative that obtained plots throughout this section of Knoxville during the Reconstruction era. I tapped the envelope gently. "This confirms my grandfather did not sell the land. It was leased. Ownership returned to us following a default, though this information was never shared." Brittany's smirk disappeared. Lee stopped scrolling. Cliff cleared his throat. "I believe it's time for you to leave, sir," he stated. "I think it's time someone examines the contents," Maurice said calmly. Then, an unexpected event occurred. A man from the office furthest to the left, John Delgado, the branch manager, emerged. He had been observing through the glass for the preceding few minutes. He requested the documents. Morris provided them immediately. John escorted them back to his office. A period of silence followed, lasting briefly. Subsequently, 5 minutes elapsed, then 10. Eventually, John appeared. His expression was altered. "Connect me with regional compliance on the line." Immediately, he stated. As phones began to ring and conversations grew concerned, Maurice remained still at his position by the counter. He was anticipating something, and they all understood instinctively that it wasn't a monetary request. Cliff walked back and forth behind the teller row, massaging the back of his neck, as if that would aid his comprehension of what he's heard. John Delgado continued on the phone, speaking in brief, strange sentences to someone at corporate. His office blinds were partially closed, but every few seconds, a glimpse of his face emerged from the gap. He wasn't smiling anymore. Brittany stood uncomfortably at her station, looking sideways at Maurice, who hadn't moved from his position. His hands were folded, and documents rested gently on the counter in front of him. "Do you want to sit down?" she finally asked, her voice softer. Maurice shook his head. "I've done enough sitting in my life." A man in a tailored suit and thick-rimmed glasses walked in briskly from a back entrance. His ID badge read Gerald Tisdale, Regional Property and Compliance. He went straight to Delgado's office without a word. Moments later, John opened the door again and waved for Maurice. "Sir, would you mind stepping in for a moment?" Maurice nodded once and retrieved his envelope. His boots made a slight scuffing sound against the tile as he entered the office. As the door closed behind him, the remaining staff members quieted. No one spoke. Even the security guard adjusted his position, uncertain whether to remain nearby or act as if nothing was occurring. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. "Mr. Langston," Gerald stated cautiously, "I've reviewed the original deed and the tax history you provided. Could you please tell us where you've been keeping these documents?" "My father kept it in a box of his belongings," Maurice responded. "He was a carpenter, building houses in Alcoa and Maryville before his knees failed. After he passed away, I kept the papers in a locker at a storage unit I used when I lacked permanent housing." Delgado appeared astonished. "You're saying this land was never sold? That the trust was still active?" Maurice retrieved a smaller, more recent envelope and gave it to Gerald. Inside was a typed letter from a small firm in Chattanooga, a probate specialist named Lena Fry, confirming the lapse in city filings and the reversion clause in the original agreement. The letter was dated 6 months ago. I only found it after she assisted me in reviewing some of my dad's old files. "Thought it was junk at first," Gerald said, staring at the paper. His mouth opened a little, but he didn't speak. "Legally," Maurice explained, "this building stood on land that was part of my grandfather's estate. The lease agreement had been temporary. As the bank underwent mergers and changes in ownership over the years, the arrangement wasn't renewed. They simply built on the land, presuming no one would inquire." Delgado rubbed his temple. "That represented decades of transactions," Maurice stated, "and not a single one examined the records far enough back. Everyone seemed to think the past had resolved itself." Gerald rose quickly and gazed out the office window. "We need to involve legal right away," he stated. "Already done," John responded quietly. A voice drifted from outside the office, speaking too loudly. Why would a homeless man return for this now? What would he possibly do with a piece of land beneath a bank? Inside, Maurice noticed. He glanced towards the window, then resumed looking at Gerald. "I didn't come for money," he said. "I came seeking the truth, and perhaps a measure of respect." Gerald turned, finally meeting my eyes. There was a pause. "You are not wrong, but while discussions focused on compliance and liability, something else was unfolding in the lobby. Whispers had escalated to murmurs, and one employee was already texting someone outside the bank. The story, as it turns out, began long before Maurice ever entered that bank. Prior to the advent of smartphones, before suburban expansion consumed agricultural land, before the concept of a man like Maurice could be envisioned, standing serenely with a document, contesting the very core of a multi-million-dollar organization. In 1913, Franklin Delroy, Morris's grandfather, was 23 years old and already recognized within Blount County for his skilled workmanship. His hands constructed churches, schoolhouses, and porches that remained standing a century later. Unbeknownst to many, Franklin was also a member of a discreet, close-knit group of black tradesmen, farmers, and ministers who combined their resources to purchase land. The purpose wasn't financial gain, but a matter of dignity. They identified as the East Bluntland Cooperative, and, throughout the years, they obtained small plots on the periphery of what was then essentially cow pasture. However, Franklin, ever the visionary, included a specific provision in his deed. Should the land ever undergo development, leasing, or a claim by another party without a sale, ownership would return to his descendants after a specified duration. In 1927, a lumber company made a payment to lease the land for a limited time. Subsequently, a warehouse was constructed, followed by a small credit union. By the 1970s, that credit union had transformed into a regional bank. And when it was acquired again in 2003, all of the original documents were misplaced, overlooked, or lost within the new ownership. The Delroy family was never notified. Franklin was gone by that point. Morris's father, Jasper Langston, attempted to preserve the family's history. However, circumstances grew difficult. Employment opportunities disappeared, and Jasper began drinking. The traditional stories evolved into mere bedtime stories, losing any sense of verifiable truth. Morris recalled sitting on the porch in his youth, listening to his dad describe the plot by the rail tracks that Granddaddy owned. Yet, it held little significance for him. The stories remained just that, stories, until he matured and understood how families like his were frequently excluded from their own history. In 2020, when COVID caused widespread closures and Morris was residing in a church basement in Sevierville, he finally sorted through the last of his father's possessions. Among them, he discovered the original deed carefully wrapped in wax paper, and within it, a small note written in his dad's handwriting. "If you find this, don't let him tell you we didn't leave anything behind." Morris took that note with great importance. He dedicated months to research at the public library. He made trips to the county clerk's office. He consulted with Lena Fry, the probate attorney who remained professional when he shared the story with her. She located the land records and carefully compared parcel numbers, and she verified his findings. The land, now valued at millions, had been leased, not sold. The original clause remained in effect. No legal purchase had ever occurred. Consequently, after years of homelessness, this situation seems quite unusual. Morris entered the building constructed upon his grandfather's land and stated something unexpected. "I believe this belongs to me." At the bank, John Delgado now had the documents spread across his desk. They contained a century's worth of signatures, carbon copies, and ink stamps from courthouses that no longer existed. Gerald, the regional compliance officer, examined one page as if it had committed a personal offense. According to this clause, he stated, "The property returns to the original family if the lease expires without renewal or sale." John confirmed this had occurred twice, and the family was not notified. "That's correct." A significant silence followed. Then Gerald quietly expressed concern, saying, "We're in trouble." Maurice remained seated opposite them, silent. He showed no sign of a smile. However, a sense of calm was evident on his face. It was as if a man had, at long last, joined together all the pieces of a puzzle and possessed the perseverance to complete it. As events aligned within that office, a woman on her lunch break began live streaming the growing disturbance outside the bank. The unfolding situation quickly transcended their internal narrative. The lobby's ambience underwent a change. Initial silent assessment evolved into quiet wonder. The atmosphere then became something different altogether, a palpable sense of nervous anticipation. A teller had moved away from her workspace and was positioned by the coffee machine, appearing to stir sugar while observing the office door as if expecting someone to enter. The security guard had repositioned himself, now standing nearer to Morris's chair, seemingly not for protection, but perhaps to observe. Beyond the glass partitions, John Delgado's office was full. Gerald Tisdale was participating in a video conference with a group of legal representatives from corporate, their faces difficult to interpret. A senior counsel, Mark Levin, repeatedly posed the same inquiry. How did this oversight occur? No one could provide a satisfactory explanation. The numerous transfers of ownership involving various parent companies and banks had obscured the documentation until Morris brought it back to their attention. "There's a public title gap," Gerald stated. "No signed release, no recorded sale." The reversion clause was never satisfied. Mark Levin moved closer to the screen. "Does this man, Langston, possess the original documents?" John stated that he has more than just documents. He has lineage, and we verified the parcel data. It's the same land. The only alterations were the asphalt and steel constructed upon it. Mark pinched his nose. Okay, here's what we need. Secure a release from this man. Offer a small settlement. Remove him from the building before the press arrives. Maurice, seated quietly nearby, understood their thinking without needing to hear the discussion. He understood the atmosphere. After decades of observing how people assess your value, John ended the call and turned to him. Mr. Langston, would you be willing to settle this today? We could quietly arrange compensation, something equitable. Morris folded his arms. What's fair to you? John paused. That would require negotiation. But if we act quickly, we could avoid unwanted publicity. Maurice chuckled softly. Unwanted by whom? John momentarily looked surprised. A knock sounded at the glass door. A woman, identifiable by the local news logo on her lanyard, smiled and raised her phone. Hello. We've received information that someone entered with a land deed asserting ownership of the bank property. May we speak with Mr. Langston? John's face visibly drained. Who informed you? A voice from the lobby murmured. The live streams have exceeded 12,000 viewers. Morris rose to his feet deliberately. There's nothing to be concerned about. I'm not intending to cause a disturbance. Gerald approached. Mr. Langston, please understand that this situation requires careful handling. It would benefit everyone involved if we could maintain discretion. I attempted a subtle approach, Maurice stated. I'm accustomed to quiet. It defined much of my existence. It yielded no progress. A pause settled over the group. Gerald seemed poised to object, but a palpable truth lingered, inescapable. Returning to the lobby, Brittany spoke softly to Maurice. The amusement had vanished from her face. Do you truly possess this? She inquired. I have always possessed it, he replied. The recollection seemed to simply vanish. She lowered her gaze, a hint of embarrassment visible. I'm sorry. Morris's expression eased a little. It's not your fault. You were instructed on how to behave when someone like me enters. The bank's doors opened once more, and 2 additional reporters entered. A man carried a boom microphone over his shoulder. Another began recording with his phone. Cliff attempted to block their entry. This is private property. A reporter responded, observing Maurice. Not for long. As inquiries began from the media, Maurice did not seek attention. He instead glanced back at the familiar envelope he held, the one that held his family's history across generations, and understood it was time for the world to know it. Maurice needed no microphone. He needed no formal announcement. He simply needed to remain where he was. That was sufficient. A reporter, a woman in her 40s named Kimber Rowland from WBR, approached. Mr. Langston, could you verify that you assert ownership of the land the bank occupies? Maurice met her gaze, unwavering. I'm not asserting anything, he stated. I'm presenting facts, and the document in my hand demonstrates what none of you ever took the time to investigate. Kimber nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the significance in his tone. What outcome are you pursuing with this? Maurice didn't respond immediately. He turned to address the increasingly large gathering. There were customers, employees, and security present, with some people watching from the sidewalk. What I'm hoping for, he said finally, is that the next time someone walks in looking like I do, maybe people won't react with amusement first. The silence that followed was palpable. The young man who had been laughing earlier near the coffee machine suddenly looked down at his shoes. Brittany tightened her grip on her ID badge and avoided his gaze. Cliff shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat. Look, sir, I didn't mean any disrespect. You need to comprehend. We simply weren't prepared. There was laughter. Maurice intervened. You all responded that way. The moment I entered the room, you observed my coat, my shoes, the discoloration on my hands, and you determined I was insignificant. No one spoke. Have you ever considered how many people you're likely to dismiss each day? Moving around here as if you possess all the knowledge, as if you've already assessed someone's narrative merely by viewing their exterior. John Delgado moved ahead, attempting to redirect the situation. Mr. Langston, we are ready to offer a formal apology and begin settlement negotiations. Maurice gave him a drawn-out, weary look. Do you still believe this concerns finances? A teenager with a camera phone murmured to his friend, out of view of the reporters, Dude, this person is really committed. Observe the documents. Kimber, perceiving something more significant, inquired, "Where have you been until now? What prompted you to come forward at this time?" Maurice sighed, not in annoyance, simply in contemplation. "Following my dad's passing, I lost interest in matters of this nature. I was preoccupied with basic survival, taking on sporadic jobs like roofing, welding, and janitorial work whenever available. Maintaining stable housing proved difficult when people avoided direct interaction. I experienced periods of both prosperity and hardship, followed by even more challenging times." He paused. "There were nights I slept under bridges and mornings I cleaned the same floors people used to ignore me. However, I never discarded that envelope. The memory of every shelter I stayed in, every town I passed through, remained with me." He held it up gently. "It's all I had left from a man who believed we were worth more than people thought. And one day, I simply grew weary of silence." A woman from the crowd spoke softly. "You kept the deed all these years?" Maurice nodded. 50 years it stayed in our family. Passed from one calloused hand to another, Kimber asked. "And what now?" He surveyed the bank lobby, his gaze lingering on each employee who had assessed him that morning. "What now?" He repeated. "Now you recall my name." From a corner location, Gerald spoke to John. "This is going to be a public relations disaster." However, the individuals within the bank weren't observing Gerald, they were observing Maurice. Truly observing. Some for the first time, as if a barrier had been removed. Not just from his narrative, but from theirs as well. "You believe I was unseen?" Maurice stated softly. "I remained present. You simply didn't observe carefully enough." However, the outside world had already begun to notice. They perceived a man who brought more than just a deed to that building. He carried evidence that dignity isn't derived from affluence. It arises from steadfastly maintaining one's identity. By the following morning, the narrative had spread beyond state lines. Every local news station in Tennessee aired a rendition of it. Some reported inaccuracies. A report suggested Maurice had assumed control of the bank, a claim that proved false. Nevertheless, the message spread. Residents of Blount County, particularly older individuals, began searching through attics and storage boxes, questioning what they might have overlooked. College students shared excerpts online with accompanying text, such as "This exemplifies generational theft." To them, Maurice wasn't a news item. He represented an alert and a sign. At the bank, the situation quickly worsened. Legal representatives from the corporation arrived from elsewhere. Security personnel were now joined by local police officers patrolling the parking lot, employed for crowd management. Demonstrators had assembled along the sidewalk, displaying cardboard signs. Their messages included phrases like "respect land rights." Not just a deed, a legacy. He was right all along. Maurice hadn't organized the gathering, nor had he requested anyone to attend, yet they came. Inside the building, the atmosphere was tense. Gerald Tisdale was pacing once more, his face flushed as he managed calls from corporate and press liaisons. John Delgado was in his office, with the blinds completely shut, feeling the burden of everything. Maurice was in the break room, drinking coffee from paper cup. "Never thought I'd be allowed in here," he remarked, mostly to himself. Kimber Rowland had returned, and her camera crew was filming quietly from the parking lot. She wasn't trying to create problems. She was simply waiting for the story to unfold. That afternoon, a legal representative, Clay Addison, entered the bank. He possessed a clean-shaven appearance, a southern drawl, and wore a silk tie that appeared more valuable than Morris's entire wardrobe. He did not offer a smile. "Mr. Langston," Clay began, settling across from him, "let me start by saying our firm recognizes the validity of your documentation. We are here to discuss terms." Maurice listened intently, remaining still. "You placed our client in a complex situation. We acknowledge the oversight and are ready to present a substantial financial offer for the permanent transfer of ownership." A paper was slid across the table by Clay. Maurice looked at it, then raised his gaze. "You believe this is the core issue?" he inquired, his voice level. "It's a considerable sum," Clay stated. "It's a price," Maurice replied, "and it doesn't come close to covering what you're attempting to resolve." Clay released a sharp breath. "What would be acceptable to you?" Maurice leaned forward, composed but resolute. I want a plaque with my grandfather's name displayed out front. I also want the official record corrected with the city, and I want a foundation established in his name, one that provides housing for families who have experienced similar circumstances. Clay blinked. Are you serious? I'm absolutely serious. There's a significant pause. Then Clay said, I will present this to the board. You please do that. Information about the negotiation became public the same day. And when it did, an unforeseen development occurred. People began making donations. People donated online, in person, and by check. One woman from Jackson traveled 2 hours to personally hand Maurice a $20 bill and express her gratitude for him, ensuring they weren't forgotten. The bank subsequently released a brief statement later that week, stating, we recognize the validity of Mr. Maurice Langston's claim and are working in good faith to resolve this matter respectfully. We have deep appreciation for the legacy of Franklin Delroy and the community he helped build. While corporate and sanitized, this statement was unexpected. Regarding Maurice, there was no celebration. No press conference was held. He simply exited the bank one afternoon, carrying the same envelope he had entered with. However, this time he wasn't alone. 3 generations of Delroys stood with him in spirit, and hundreds more supported them. While legal teams assessed expenses and public relations teams prepared announcements, the most important aspect had already transpired. Someone like Maurice had finally been acknowledged, and the narrative was no longer controlled by the bank. It belonged to everyone who had ever been forgotten. The sun shone that morning. Maurice Langston stood in front of the bank again. Now, he wasn't standing on disputed land. He was standing on his grandfather's land, officially recognized by the city of Knoxville as part of the Franklin Delroy Legacy Trust. It wasn't just a name on paper anymore. A new plaque had been installed outside the bank's main entrance, embedded in a small brick pedestal near the sidewalk. Bronze letters, clear and lasting. Dedicated to Franklin Delroy, 1890 to 1954, builder, father, landowner. His legacy endures. Maurice touched it softly. The plaque felt cool beneath his fingertips. He remained silent. Words weren't necessary. A small group had assembled for the unveiling. Community leaders, students from the local university, reporters, and some of the same bank staff who previously ridiculed him were present. Brittany stood at the rear, her hands clasped, attempting to make eye contact with Maurice whenever he turned. This time he succeeded. The foundation he had proposed was already being established. A partnership with a local nonprofit was formed within weeks of the settlement. The Delroy Housing Fund would provide grants to families at risk of homelessness, particularly those who have been disadvantaged by legal complexities and overlooked actions. I didn't desire revenge, Maurice told Kimber Rowland in his final interview. I simply wanted the truth to endure beyond the falsehood. It had taken years to reach this point. For years, he had experienced being overlooked, marginalized, and disregarded. However, the instant he entered through those glass doors, holding a creased envelope and a legacy of suffering, things began to shift. And currently, he was simply a man identified by a name. He had acquired a modest, well-kept house not distant from the outskirts of Alcoa, close to the same areas where his father had previously constructed porches and fences. It wasn't elaborate, merely a neat area, a functional sink, a bed to relax in. Occasionally, he would sit on a plastic chair outside, sipping coffee and greeting children cycling up the slope. On other occasions, he collaborated with local high schools, discussing land ownership, family histories, and the consequences of oblivion with students. Preserve your documents, he advised them. Retain your names. Ensure no one erases your people from the narrative. People now referred to him as Mr. Langston. At times, even Sir, but the designation he valued most was the one his grandfather had attained. Builder. It wasn't about buildings, but about something larger. Legacy. He never anticipated forgiveness from the bank. However, it wasn't necessary. What he required, he received: an acknowledgement, a correction, and the opportunity for those who followed to declare, I belong here too. The bank continued its operations, but the employees carried themselves differently. They engaged with people they had previously overlooked. They posed questions rather than making assumptions. The transformation wasn't flawless, but it represented a meaningful shift. One afternoon, several months following the resolution of events, Brittany approached him outside the community center. "Mr. Langston?" she asked, her voice betraying nervousness. "Yes," he replied. I've been taking night classes. Real estate law." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" he inquired. "After everything that happened, I realized how much I didn't know. About ownership, history, how things get passed down or lost." Morris smiled, slow and genuine. "Good for you." She paused. "I'm sorry for how I treated you that first day." He nodded. An apology wasn't necessary. It was owed to the individual who would next enter. She considered this thoughtfully, responding, "Yes, I will." He retrieved a copy of the original deed, a replica, to be exact, from his coat and gave it to her. "Keep this. Use it in class. Teach someone something." She accepted it with care, as if it were fragile. As she departed, Morris looked towards the street and observed a group of teenagers assembling at the bus stop across the road. One of them gestured towards the plaque. The others drew closer to listen. He remained silent, allowing them to continue. He simply observed, a quiet sense of pride welling up within him, as his grandfather's name emerged in the discussion once more. Perhaps that's how genuine transformation truly begins. Not through rage, nor solely through the pursuit of justice, but through remembrance and the bravery to keep it alive. Should you experience a feeling while hearing Morris's narrative, do not hold it back. Spread it. Discuss it. And if there's a family name you haven't mentioned in some time, vocalize it. The impact of legacies endures only when we actively preserve them. Subscribe for more stories that illuminate the true meaning of dignity. Laughter followed the reserve girl, until a video appeared showing her protecting herself with remarkable composure, shifting the opinions of both Roosevelt High and the online community against her tormentor. If you inquired among the students at Roosevelt High about who held sway in the corridors, the response would invariably be one name: Brielle Wentworth. 17 years old, known for her quick wit and consistently ahead of the latest trends, Brielle was more than a senior. She was the senior. Brielle's father was a prominent corporate attorney in Sacramento, while her mother managed a luxury staging company for real estate. Their home in El Dorado Hills had been featured in a spread showcasing modern home design. She drove a graphite Range Rover, sported limited edition sneakers that were yet to be released, and possessed a TikTok following exceeding that of many local influencers. To those outside, Brielle appeared to have everything, and she was content with that perception. Each morning presented an opportunity for a performance. She entered school with a graceful, almost effortless stride. Impeccable hair, perfect lashes, AirPods in, iced coffee in hand. Girls aspired to be her. Boys observed her every move. Teachers expressed frustration, but even they acknowledged her intelligence. Just intelligent enough to avoid failing, never quite striving hard enough to fully challenge herself. That fall, senior year was progressing exactly as she'd envisioned. Prom committee, brand collaborations, homecoming queen virtually assured, no one jeopardized her position until Ayanna Brooks walked in. She arrived without fanfare, no elaborate smile, no designer handbag, just a simple canvas backpack, her braided hair neatly pulled back, and a subtle acknowledgement to the teacher. She had transferred from a charter school in Vallejo. A full scholarship, based on academic merit, was the extent of what anyone initially knew. She took a seat 2 rows in front of Brielle in AP Literature, and within the first week, murmurs began regarding her already achieving the highest grade in the class. Within 2 weeks, Mr. Daniels read aloud one of Ayanna's essays, not only to check for grammar, but because it genuinely affected him. Brielle disapproved of this. She didn't voice it, but a slight movement of her lip betrayed her feelings. The way her eyes focused intently when Ayanna responded to questions without notes, and the subtle sound she made when Mr. Daniels asked her to expand on what Ayanna had just said, all revealed her discomfort. Brielle had witnessed many new girls arrive and depart, attractive girls, intelligent girls, unusual girls, but Ayanna was unlike any she's seen before. She made no effort to compete. She didn't flirt with teachers or seek attention, and that, in turn, made her stand out. In the cafeteria, Ayanna sat alone, not in a way that suggested sadness, but more as if she preferred it. She read during lunch, sometimes with earbuds in, sometimes not, consistently calm and unreadable. Brielle found it difficult to tolerate her composure. "She's acting like she's better than everyone," Brielle muttered to her friend Mackenzie one afternoon. Near the gym's vending machines, they stood. Mackenzie chewed her gum and gave a slight lift of her shoulders. She appeared reserved, perhaps even timid, Brielle observed. "No," Brielle stated directly. "She's strategic. One doesn't adopt an aura of innocence and grace unless it's intentional, meant to attract attention." This wasn't envy, Brielle reassured herself. It was about maintaining control. If others began to admire Ayanna's intelligence and composed demeanor, what would that signify for her? And what of the carefully constructed persona she had cultivated? It began subtly, with hushed comments near Ayanna's locker. Remarks like, "Oh wow, did you bring your thesis today?" Manufactured gasps occurred during roll call when Ayanna's name was called in multiple AP classes. There were also sarcastic comments about her library clothes and her perceived religious demeanor. Ayanna remained unfazed. She consistently attended, excelled on every quiz, and navigated the halls as if the behavior didn't affect her. Even when Brielle made eye contact and smirked, she received no response. However, this only escalated the situation. Brielle craved a reaction. She desired control. What she couldn't control worried her. However, a change was imminent, and not the kind Brielle anticipated. It began with Brielle posing a question just loud enough to be heard. Does she even talk? Or does she just blink Morse code? This occurred during AP statistics. Several students laughed quietly. Ayanna looked to the side, but continued her work. Mr. Fielding remained silent, but hesitated noticeably before resuming the lesson. Brielle smiled, and the others followed suit. She had established the atmosphere. Things became less difficult after that. It was almost natural, a contrived cough whenever Ayanna entered class. Disdainful eye rolls when she raised her hand. Brielle even began imitating the way Ayanna sat, back straight, legs crossed, hands folded, in an exaggerated and cartoonish way, just enough for her friends to erupt in laughter. Ayanna made no reply, but she was aware. Naturally, she was aware. During one afternoon in the library, Ayanna was seated by the window, working on calculus problems. A junior, Sean, pulled a chair over to her and sat down without permission. "You don't talk much, huh?" he said. She looked up. "I talk, just not when I don't need to." "You think you're better than everyone? Or are you just antisocial?" She replied, "I think I'm trying to study." He scoffed, stood up, and walked away. Two girls near the printer chuckled. One of them murmured, "Attitude on silent mode." Ayanna didn't react visibly, though her pencil paused. Later that evening at home, her mother observed that she was uncharacteristically subdued. "You all right, sweetie?" she inquired, serving rice. Ayanna offered a slight movement of her shoulders. "The usual?" Her mom regarded her with a knowing glance, the kind reserved for moments when a child is troubled but not ready to share. Meanwhile, in El Dorado Hills, Brielle was eating dinner with her mom, checking TikTok while pushing around salmon she hadn't requested. "I heard the new girl aced the chem test," her mom said, not looking up from her phone. "Cool," Brielle replied. "Maybe she could tutor you." Brielle looked up slowly. "What?" "You know, if you want to bring your grade up before early decision apps are due." "She's not even applying to the same schools as me." "How do you know?" "I just know." Her mom didn't push further, but Brielle's jaw stayed, clenched the rest of the meal. Back at school, the teasing moved into group chats. A meme depicting Ayanna studying by herself during lunch circulated online, accompanied by the caption, "Plotting her next essay to destroy us all." It spread through private stories, appeared repeatedly in comment sections, and evolved into a shared joke. Publicly, no one defended her. However, Ethan Mercado, a reserve student from AV Club, approached her at her locker one afternoon. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. She looked up, visibly surprised. Yeah, why? She replied. I've seen what's being said, he stated, and I don't participate in the laughter. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. He paused. Have you ever wanted company during lunch? Or something similar? She didn't confirm, but she didn't decline either. Regardless, the stares continued. The whispers persisted, and Brielle kept observing, always from a distance, attempting to understand why Ayana wasn't faltering. Then, one day in lit class, Mr. Daniels made an error. He returned essays. Ayana's received a 99. Brielle's received a 72. He didn't comment verbally, simply distributing the papers as normal. However, Brielle noticed the grades and became upset. Did you even read mine? She asked, her voice sharp. The room fell silent. Mr. Daniels blinked. Excuse me? You gave her a 99, and mine barely passes. Brielle responded, If you have a question about your grade, we can discuss it after class, she said dismissively. Whatever, he muttered. She kept her eyes on the desk, her pen tapping lightly. After class, Ethan approached Ayana again. She's scared of you, you know. Ayana shook her head. She just doesn't understand me. She doesn't want to. This was a critical moment. Brielle felt a surge of fear, knowing she was on the verge of an action that would dramatically alter circumstances. This time, the entire student body of Meadowbrook High would witness it. Thursday afternoon felt interminable, heavy with humidity. The air conditioning in the school cafeteria had been unreliable throughout the week, contributing to an already strained atmosphere. Brielle, feeling listless and agitated, rested her chin on her hand, gazing across the room at Ayana from her tray of uneaten chicken nuggets. Ayana was in her usual spot, near the far windows, eating quietly with a paperback, Things Fall Apart, beside her tray. Brielle scowled. Naturally, she's reading something with a title like that, she murmured. Mackenzie looked up, questioning. You're still focused on this. She seems to think she's special. Exactly, Brielle retorted. And people are treating that like it's a positive thing. Mackenzie paused. So, are you suggesting you want to throw food at her? No, Brielle stated. She wanted to allow her a brief pause. It was then that the concept began to develop. She involved Zach and Nina, two juniors eager to gain her favor. They possessed access to the AV Club's green screen equipment and a copy of the morning announcements video. Within less than a day, they created a fabricated segment. Ayana's face was superimposed onto an old news anchor's body, accompanied by robotic audio. The title read, Ayana Brooks proclaims herself queen of Roosevelt High. It was foolish, yet well executed. It appeared remarkably authentic. The strategy? To broadcast it during morning announcements just before the start of second period. And it succeeded. Initially, that Friday morning, immediately following the Pledge of Allegiance, the video began playing. For a moment, many students paused, visibly confused. Then, laughter erupted. It was loud, unpleasant, and reverberated through the hallways. Ayana was in third period English when she heard about it. A sophomore rushed into the classroom, holding a phone, and showed her the video. Yo, Ayana, did you see this? He said, still laughing. She didn't respond. She simply looked at the screen, her own face appearing warped, her voice sounding mechanical and derisive. She blinked once, then closed her eyes firmly, as if attempting to erase everything. Afterward that day, Brielle encountered her in the hall. Hey, she said gently, I enjoyed your short presentation this morning. Ayana halted her movement, turned deliberately. Their eyes connected, truly connected for the first time. And for a brief instant, Brielle sensed something. Not regret, but a trace of doubt. As if she wasn't certain anymore who held the advantage. That night, Ayana sat at the kitchen table, her laptop closed, tea growing cold beside her. Her mom sat across from her. They're messing with you again? Ayana nodded. You want me to call someone? No, it'll make it worse. Her mom leaned forward. Baby, what they're doing isn't just teasing anymore. It's harassment. Ayana's jaw clenched. They're waiting for me to snap. I'm not giving them that. Her mom studied her face. You sure? Ayana's voice was low. I'm sure. Her hands trembled beneath the table. The following morning, she arrived at school wearing black leggings and a plain hoodie. She carried nothing but her phone, no books, no backpack. She proceeded directly past the main office, bypassing her locker, and headed straight to the gym. There, she sat silently on the bleachers as the warm-ups began. The girls' volleyball team observed her. Coach Ramirez noticed her and came over. "Ayana, is everything all right?" he asked. "I just need to use the gym after school. Is that a problem?" He appeared puzzled but nodded. There were only 15 minutes between practice and basketball. That was all the time she had. She thanked him, and she waited. After school, Ayana returned. Coach had left the mats out. She took one to the center of the floor and placed her bag next to it. For the subsequent 15 minutes, she moved. Fluidly, sharply, powerfully. Snap kicks, elbow strikes, pivot turns. Breathe. Reset. Again. There wasn't any music. There was no audience. Just motion. Just discipline. She was unaware that someone had entered. She was completely unaware that he had recorded it. It was Ethan. He remained silent, simply observing. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he pressed record. Later that night, he posted a 19-second clip with the caption, "They picked the wrong one." No tags, no names, just movement, precision, focus. The video quickly gained attention, and once it spread, nothing at Roosevelt would ever be the same. By Monday morning, the clip had reached over 200,000 views. No names, no faces. A young woman in a hoodie moved with the precision of an action film star. Her movements were seamless, accurate, and completely controlled. The video gained widespread attention on TikTok, sparking numerous reactions. Users created stitched videos attempting to replicate her kicks, and the comment section was filled with speculation. Who was she? She executed every movement flawlessly. It was evident she had received training, though at Roosevelt High, the truth wasn't widely known. Not yet. In first period, Brielle was seated with her feet resting on the desk, using her phone. She watched the video, paused, and tilted her head. "She looks familiar," she muttered. By lunch, someone had made the connection. Ayana's name began circulating through the halls again. But this time, the tone was different. Less ridicule, more inquisitiveness, and something else Brielle hadn't experienced before. Respect. "She's the one from the video. I thought she was just a nerd. Yo, she's genuine." Brielle sensed it. The change. Not a complete takeover, but its initial stage. She began to notice hushed conversations that excluded her. Praise that wasn't directed at her. The shifts were minor, yet they caused her distress. That afternoon, she confronted Ayana near the science wing. Ayana was walking alone, wearing earbuds and a hoodie. She paused when Brielle blocked her path, arms crossed. "You think you're clever, huh?" Brielle said. Ayana removed one earbud. "What? Are you trying to go viral now? Playing the humble angle?" Ayana blinked deliberately. "I didn't post that video." Brielle let out a scoff. It seemed like a coincidence that this appeared just as people started calling her strange. Ayana remained still, composed. "You know what your problem is?" Brielle moved closer. "You carry yourself as if you're above speaking to anyone, and then you act surprised when people don't care for you." "I don't act surprised," Ayana replied quietly. Brielle's cheeks reddened. She glanced around. Several students nearby had paused, observing, watching, waiting. "I'm warning you," Brielle hissed. Ayana turned to leave. Then Brielle pushed her. The push wasn't forceful, but it was calculated, public enough to draw attention, and loud enough to elicit gasps. Ayana faltered slightly, regained her balance, and turned to face Brielle. They held each other's gaze for a drawn-out moment. Subsequently, Ayana reacted. She avoided striking Brielle. Instead, she intercepted the subsequent push with such speed that Brielle's wrist rotated, throwing her off balance. Ayana then moved to her side and resumed her position. The entire exchange concluded in fewer than 3 seconds. The incident was recorded on a phone. It captured the precise moment Ayana's foot landed, the subtle movement of Brielle's arms, Ayana's stillness, her unwillingness to retaliate. This new video surpassed the initial one, spreading rapidly. By that evening, news organizations had begun contacting Roosevelt High. Some described it as a display of controlled self-defense. Others characterized it as the moment the reserved girl silenced everything. Ayanna remained silent, making no social media posts or tweets. She remained silent regarding the online discussions. She simply attended school Tuesday morning, holding her head high and with her hoodie unzipped. Surprisingly, there was no laughter, neither in the hallways, nor in the cafeteria, and not even within the group chats. Brielle, however, struggled to reach third period before others began to avoid her. This wasn't due to fear, but rather embarrassment. The question lingered. Why would she push her? What prompted her to touch her? Everyone saw the video. Ayanna hadn't even thrown a punch. Brielle attempted to explain. She tried to make light of the situation. No one paid attention. And for the first time in her life, Brielle Wentworth felt truly observed. Not in the manner she had constructed her existence. However, the significant consequences were yet to unfold. They wouldn't start until individuals began taking sides. By midweek, Ayanna Brooks was a name recognized beyond Sacramento. A local channel broadcasted the video, presenting a brief report. Student defends herself with poise after being confronted at school. The martial arts studio in Vallejo shared a clip of her, commending her technique and poise. A Reddit user discovered earlier footage of her competing in a junior nationals tournament when she was 10 years old. She had secured gold. Consequently, Ayanna transitioned from being a reserve scholarship student to a subject of public attention. At Roosevelt High, a palpable change occurred. Teachers discussed her in break rooms, and guidance counselors conducted private meetings. Several parents emailed the school, inquiring about plans to handle bullying following recent occurrences. Brielle was experiencing a significant amount of it. She attempted to appear unaffected, arriving at school wearing sunglasses and large hoodies, feigning a lack of distress. However, the pain persisted. Each time someone ignored her, each time Ayanna's name was mentioned without including hers, she felt deeply hurt and recalled Mr. Daniels' words. Courage sometimes is saying nothing at all. Demonstrating his actions through silence, he looked towards Ayanna, who remained unengaged. Brielle felt a constriction in her chest. During lunch, she joined Mackenzie and Zach, but the table felt desolate. Discussions became uncomfortable. People avoided mentioning the unspoken, that perhaps Brielle had overreacted, that perhaps Ayanna was not at fault. Compounding the situation, her supporters began to criticize her. The remarks on her most recent post were harsh. Didn't you push her? Why are you upset that she's talented? You've contributed to why people distrust popular girls. Brielle deactivated her comments, then her DMs, then her account. At home, she forcefully closed her laptop and tossed her phone across the room. Her mother gently knocked, opened the door slightly. Would you like to talk? No. You've been unusually silent recently. I'm Fina. You're not. I said I'm fine. Silence. Then her mom's voice, soft. You know, sometimes when it feels as though everything is falling apart, it's simply the truth revealing itself. The door closed again. Returning to school, Ayanna remained unchanged. She carried herself without needing to demonstrate anything. Her clothing was the same. She showed no signs of boasting. She didn't mention the events that transpired. She simply proceeded through the day as before. That silence, which Brielle had previously disliked, was now the quality people admired the most. She was no longer simply the girl who kicked. She was something more, something Brielle had never taken the time to comprehend. Even Ethan observed this. He located her close to the lockers on Thursday afternoon, immediately following class. You okay? He inquired. Ayanna offered a weary smile, acknowledging his presence. You know people are supporting you, right? He continued. I'm not attempting to create factions. Ayanna responded, I understand. But you unintentionally did, he stated, simply by remaining still. She hesitated. I didn't desire any of this. He replied, I know. Nearby, Brielle observed their conversation. For the initial time, she wasn't experiencing anger. Instead, she felt bewildered by the recognition Ayanna was receiving. It wasn't popularity, it was genuine respect. It lacked fanfare and wasn't staged. It required no enhancements or labels. It simply existed. Brielle sat in her car after school, observing her reflection in the rearview mirror. Not the mascara or the precise eyeliner, not the carefully constructed image she typically presented. Just a girl uncertain of her identity without the attention. But even she couldn't escape the upcoming moment, the one that would ultimately compel a discussion neither of them was prepared for. The rain fell steadily on Friday as Brielle uttered the words that surprised everyone, even herself. She discovered Ayanna standing beneath the shelter outside the East Gym, waiting for her bus amidst the storm. Most students had already departed for the day. Brielle paused for a moment, her designer boots already wet, her hair beginning to frizz. Ayanna noticed her approach, but remained still. "I need to speak," Brielle said, her voice quiet. Ayanna blinked. "Then speak." "I was wrong," she said. "I'm not saying that for the internet or to fix my reputation. I didn't know how to deal with you," Brielle continued. "You were quiet, intelligent. People appreciated you without any effort on your part. That worried me." "You don't need to offer an explanation," Ayanna stated. "Actually, I do, because I invested months believing I had to be everything, constantly. Flawless, boisterous, well-liked. And then you arrived and didn't attempt to be anything other than yourself. Yet people still acknowledged you, as if you were significant. I don't need you to like me," Ayanna said softly. "I know. That's why it affected me." The rain continued to fall. Ayanna folded her arms. "You humiliated me. Openly. On multiple occasions." "I know," Ayanna replied. "You caused people to believe I was vulnerable. I initially thought you were," Brielle confessed. "But you're not." A silence followed. "I've been observing that video," Brielle added. "Not the one where you blocked me. The other one. At the gym. You appeared focused, in control, as if nothing could disrupt you." Ayanna looked at her, her expression unreadable. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I finally stopped talking long enough to listen," Brielle responded. At that moment, Ethan appeared, standing a few feet away with his backpack over one shoulder. He didn't interrupt. He simply looked at Ayanna, as if assessing the situation. Ayanna gave him a slight nod before turning back to Brielle. "I don't need an apology. I needed space." "You've already taken enough," Brielle said, biting her lip. "So we're just done?" Ayanna stated. "We were never anything. You don't have to be the antagonist in your own narrative. However, I am not here to be your path to improvement." Brielle remained silent. There was nothing further to communicate. She turned and proceeded into the rain. Ayanna lingered for a moment, simply inhaling. Afterward that evening, she settled on the couch with her mom, wearing warm socks and a throw blanket. "How was school?" her mom inquired. Ayanna paused. "Complex," her mom replied with a smile. "Isn't that just life?" Ayanna chuckled. "A gentle, genuine one." Roosevelt faced challenges, yet progress was evident. Mr. Daniels began incorporating essays centered on character development. Students who had previously remained silent were now addressing instances of minor misbehavior. Even the school board initiated a limited program focusing on bullying, student support, and mental health. However, the most significant shift was in the way individuals interacted. They observed each other with curiosity rather than pity or a focus on social standing. At some point, the quiet began to offer them a lesson. One afternoon, Mackenzie sat beside Ayanna in the cafeteria. There was no apology, no casual conversation. Just two girls eating together quietly. It needed nothing more. And Brielle? She hadn't been posting as much lately. She began arriving to class promptly. She joined the yearbook team, working behind the camera, not in front of it. It wasn't about improving her public perception. She simply needed something genuine for a change. Ayanna never went viral again. She didn't require it. She possessed what was essential. Her grades, her strength, her boundaries, her voice, even when she chose not to use it. However, the world hadn't forgotten, and neither had she. Certain events don't gain widespread attention. They remain with you. And that's where genuine transformation takes place. 2 months later, Roosevelt High appeared unchanged. Same lockers, same lunch lines, same morning announcements. Yet, a subtle alteration was perceptible. The focus that used to hold the greatest importance. Who possessed the latest shoes? The social gatherings faded. the meaning of respect evolved. It wasn't expressed through enthusiastic applause, boisterous cheers, online likes, or shares. Instead, it manifested in understated moments of genuine connection. For example, when a freshman dropped her books, four students immediately helped her without a word exchanged. Or when a newcomer sat alone, another person simply asked, "You want company?" While imperfections remained, people began to reflect more deeply. There was a deliberate pause before jokes were made, and a focus on checking in rather than immediately joining in. Ayana remained near the windows in the cafeteria. She continued to wear her hoodie on some days and still carried herself with a sense of self-assuredness. People now acknowledged her with small gestures, a wave, a smile, a casual greeting, not because they sought anything from her, but because they had finally recognized her for who she truly was. Ethan also stayed around. They didn't talk every day, but when they did, their conversations held significance. "You still training?" he asked one day as they walked out of school. "Yeah," she replied. "Every week." "Will she compete again?" She shrugged. "Possibly. Or perhaps not. I'm not doing it to win," she explained. "To focus. To stay grounded," she added, smiling. Regarding Brielle, she was still in the process of understanding things. Certain days, she reverted to previous patterns. The sarcasm, the desire for control. However, she would then recognize it, offer apologies when she previously wouldn't have, assist with tasks that went unacknowledged, share in someone else's humor without needing to be the focus. Change isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, quietly, internally. Mr. Daniels emphasized a point in class one day that resonated with both of them. Respect, he stated, is not something you demand. It's something you earn, frequently through how you treat people when you believe no one is observing. Ayana recorded the words in her notebook, not because she required the reminder, but because it felt like a meaningful return. People ceased inquiring about what truly occurred in that video. It was irrelevant now. They had witnessed the authentic story unfold over weeks, not found in video snippets. Instead, consider the decisions made. These actions carry greater significance than fleeting online sensations. The world continued, as it invariably does. However, certain students at Roosevelt progressed. They gained wisdom, developed empathy, and became slightly more observant. Occasionally, when unnoticed, Ayana would stop while walking down the hallway, observe her surroundings, and recognize a truth. She remained unchanged, yet those around her had evolved, and that was sufficient. Occasionally, the most impactful decision you can make is remaining authentic, even when all eyes are on you, anticipating collapse. It isn't necessary to be vocal to be acknowledged. It isn't required to struggle to prevail. And it isn't essential to alter yourself to gain respect. Allow your actions to demonstrate. Let your boundaries remain firm. And let your silence convey the significance that clamor cannot. If this story prompted a shift in your perspective regarding how we treat others or redefined your understanding of true strength, please like this video and subscribe. More stories are forthcoming that challenge assumptions and remind us that character isn't developed during times of ease. It's demonstrated when faced with adversity. Thank you for watching. Remain steadfast,